Welcome to the Modern Classrooms Project podcast. Each week, we bring you discussions with educators on how they use blended, self-paced, and mastery-based learning to better serve their students. We believe teachers learn best from each other, so this is our way of lifting up the voices of leaders and innovators in our community. This is the Modern Classrooms Project podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Modern Classrooms Project podcast. My name is Toni Deanon, they, them pronouns, a designated hype person here at MCP, and I am joined by a family and consumer science teacher of 12 years and a food nourishment lover, Mauranda Comley. Welcome, Mauranda.
Hi, Toni Rose. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, it's so exciting to be in this space with you. And thank you so much for saying yes to the podcast. I know that I've seen your name everywhere. You and I have emailed each other a lot too. So this is actually, I think, our first time being in the same virtual space. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was so nice to actually be face to face with you so that I could put a face to the name. And it's awesome to be here. So thank you so much for having me and taking an interest in family and consumer sciences.
Yes, you're about to expand my brain because I know very little about family and consumer sciences, so I am excited. Before we get started, Mauranda, what is bringing you joy currently?
So I am from upstate New York, and we have had so much snow, like so much snow. We have storms coming, and there's a quietness that happens with the snow. So I have 3 kids and a dog and a husband. So my house is pretty chaotic. So those moments when the snow is falling, it's just so peaceful. So even though I'm not a big winter fan, I'm really trying to find the joy in this frigid cold and just enjoy the quiet winter days. So I'm going to go with the winter snows bringing me joy.
Oh, that's the first, because I've heard a lot of people say, oh, it's too cold or there's ice outside or there's too much snow. But I really love this perspective of it's the quietness, right, that comes with it. So thank you for sharing that. I can only imagine how cold it is in upstate New York because I am in Georgia and we definitely have 69-degree weather right now. And it's so beautiful and not looking forward to summer either. So
I'm very jealous of that, Toni Rose.
Don't be. All right. So Mauranda, tell us more about who you are and how you started your MCP journey.
So I discovered the Modern Classrooms Project back in 2020 when the world was shut down and I was home, and I started to dabble a little bit with the exemplars that were on the website. I started to listen to the podcast, and I really thought that it was brilliant. And I think having that time where I could not be in the classroom, typically, like many of us weren't during that time, I was able to really take a step back and think and consider this model. And then ever since then, I slowly started to incorporate it, and I have never turned back. I absolutely love using the Modern Classrooms Project, the model in my classroom. I work for the company through the mentorship program. I've led many PLCs in my district. I love talking about it. I'm a total geek about it. And I just think that it's very revolutionary. And this is the way of education. This is the future of education is what I like to say. So I guess that's kind of my journey in a nutshell. And then I'm a family and consumer sciences teacher, FACS and FACS. And with this type of teaching, we're really looking at skills and those life skills that you really need to be a high-functioning member in society, be able to take care of yourself. And I'm extremely passionate about the content. So I really think that the model lends itself to every content area, but I really saw a need in my curriculum.
Oh, I can hear the passion, and I love that so much. And so, okay, so I guess this is a great segue to the next question, right? For listeners who may not know what FACS is, FACS, right? Family and Consumer Sciences. Tell us more about it. Like, do you have standards? Is it opt-in? How often do you see your students? How long are your classes? All of the things. Break it down for us as if like we've never come across what FACS is.
All right. Great question. So Facts covers some really great topics. I started to mention this, but I'll just kind of dive into what my district covers. So we do food and nutrition, which is my personal love, housing, childcare, financial literacy, which is also extremely important, careers, consumerism. We do a sewing unit, a lot of hands-on, a lot of those really practical skills. States are different in what they require. It is part of the CTE umbrella, if you will. So that's career and technical education. So that is a little bit more about what FACS is. I teach at the middle school. So for, again, my district, what we do, and this is very different depending on your school district, your state, et cetera. We have a middle 6th grade program, a 7th grade program, and an 8th grade program. And then at the high school, there are various electives that you can take. So there's a lot of students who really enjoy cooking, for instance, want to go into culinary, maybe in college, and they get to test some things out, see if they actually like cooking, the food prep, the science behind food, and we can kind of spark their interest at the middle level, which is what I teach. And then they can really dive into those courses at the high school and then maybe make a future for themselves beyond that.
So there are specific courses in high school. So I'm guessing like in middle school, you just give them kind of an introduction or an overview of the different parts of FACS. And then in high school, they choose what specific thing they want to focus on?
Yes, there are specific courses that you can take in high school. So at the middle school level, it's just FACS. At the high school, we have a food and nutrition class. We have a housing and interior design class. We have a child psychology class. So it really specifies the topic beyond that.
And this is really exciting too, Mauranda, because again, you're expanding my brain because I am just here assuming that family and consumer sciences is really cooking. And that's it. But now you're telling me it's housing, it's careers, it's consumerism, it's financial literacy. Like I would have never thought that that would go under that umbrella. And then also sewing, like that's really, really dope. So how does that look like with your, like, do you have standards? Do you have a curriculum that you need to follow? Or do you have the autonomy to create whatever it is that you want to create?
We do have standards and we have themes and content modules that direct what we teach. There's a lot of freedom in what we teach because we're not teaching to a test. We can interpret what we're kind of told to teach, and which I think is great because the students I were teaching 12 years ago look very different than the students I'm teaching today. And I can really alter things based on the students that are sitting in front of me. And how important is that as an educator to be able to adapt and adjust and teach them the things that they currently have in their kitchens. Instapots are becoming popular, or air fryers. So let's talk about the safety and let's kind of dive into things that they're actually using.
Oh, I mean, and thinking about age appropriate skills, right? So when we're thinking about 6th grade versus 8th grade, what's the difference that you would go over with 6th graders that you would go over with 8th graders that you would not go over with 6th graders?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a 6th grader and an 8th grader, for anyone who's listening who teaches middle school, knows that they are like polar opposites and so much growing and learning and changing happens. So at the 6th grade level, I really want to get them excited. But I also emphasize safety first and foremost, which is what I do at all the levels. But with 6th grade, we really have to take things very, very slow, very simple. And I only see 6th graders for 8 weeks. So it's a very, very quick program. It's really just to pique their interest. And so, yeah, we don't have much time with them. But it's great that my district does offer that for 6th grade.
And so all 6th graders actually take that 8-week course with you?
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I wish they did that at my middle school. How dope is that? That's really cool.
And a lot of people say that. They say, I wish I had this in my school. And so I'm trying to be an advocate for FACS and really trying to show that this is what students want to learn. This is what they need to learn.
Do you have a thought partner at your school? How many FACS teachers are there that you can collaborate with? How does collaboration look actually?
So when I first started out teaching, I taught in a very small school district. I was the only fax teacher, and I had a lot of autonomy, no thinking partners, and I was fresh out of college, 23 years old, newly married. So I was really trying to get my bearings, and I don't want to say I didn't know what I was doing, but I was just so new, and I wanted to save the world, and I just was so excited about everything. And I just tried different things, and I really let the students kind of direct what I was doing, what I was teaching, again, leaning into their interest. And then I moved districts 5 years after that, learned a lot, and I'm so thankful for that experience. But then I moved to a district that had a bigger fax program. So I teach alongside of one other middle school fax teacher. And then at the high school, we have a couple of teachers up there. So it's small, but we still have time to collaborate and to think about what we need to offer for our students.
Yeah, there's that whole vertical alignment, right? Of like, hey, you're covering middle school. And then I'm sure the high school fax teachers are saying, these are the skills that we want them to have before going to high school,
Yes.
which I think is such an important conversation, right? When we're talking about that achievement gap, having those conversations of like, hey, here are the skills that we want the students to have before they come into our spaces. And I love, because, that's what we do in English. I taught English. And so I love that the same conversations are happening in other classes as well. I mean, I knew it, but I think I just needed to be reminded. So thank you for reminding me. And so Mauranda, you actually wrote an article, which listeners, we're going to put on the show notes as well for Next Gen Learning, about the benefits of self-pacing in your classroom. And this one really stood out because it's all about, like you said, it's hands-on, right? It's very much like collaborative work. So can you share with us like 3 benefits that you wrote about, not necessarily giving away the whole article, because we do want people to read what you wrote, but just kind of a glimpse, right? Like, what are the benefits? I know that there are definitely frustrations, right? Especially when we're starting out doing something different, right? But what are the benefits for doing self-pacing in a hands-on class like yours?
All right, this is such a great question because obviously I'm very passionate about this. I wrote this article because I do think that more teachers need to be doing self-pacing, especially in those skills-based classes. So learn, master, and move on. I will say this. I want you to learn something. I want you to master it, completely understand it, and then you need to move on. So I think that a lot of my students have given me feedback through reflections or conversations I've had with them that they really like that they can take the assignment or take the skill that I want them to learn, spend time learning it, and then do their mastery check or master it in the way that we've laid it out. And then they can move on. They don't have to wait for everybody. I just picture that kid in the back of the classroom rolling their eyes and like picking at their finger and just kind of looking around like, all right, let's move on. And they don't have to do that. They can move on when they're ready. Another huge benefit is having teacher helpers. So teachers, obviously, we're always doing a million things. Some of the things that we do, we really can have students help us with. So I'll have students input stuff into the public tracker. I'll have students pass out work. I'll have, during my sewing unit, I'll have a star student go around and help students thread their needle and tie a knot. So it's so rewarding for them and for me to then see them teaching, because that's, the highest level there, right there. And then the other benefit I would say is the environment. So when you walk into my classroom, I usually have music playing, students are working, the substitutes love coming into my classroom, which I'm sure that you've heard a million times over, because students know what they're doing. They grab their work, they move around the room as needed, they know where the mastery check station is, they just know the drill. And again, there's not that high intensity teacher, shouting at the front of the classroom, trying to get everyone's attention, keep everyone awake. Everyone's kind of doing their thing. And it's just a very relaxing environment. And I see you laughing, Toni Rose, because you know what it's like sometimes.
No, I really like that you pointed out that it's shouting in front of the classroom, because that is really what we're doing, is shouting and hoping that kids pick up one or two words, right, that we said while we're shouting, because everyone else is doing 10 million things, especially in middle school. And so, you talked about teacher helpers, which I love, right? Really creating and cultivating student leaders in the classroom and hyping them up, honestly, of just like, hey, you got this. So now you get to, teach everyone else. And the more that you are able to have conversations about the skills, then the more that you learn about it, right? Like the more that you just kind of, it sticks in your head longer or more, right? And so I guess my next question is rather like, there's a lot of trust in that, right? Like you said, the students are moving things around in the public pacing tracker, which I think sometimes teachers are really hesitant about. How did you relinquish that control, right? How did you create this community of learners where you can trust them to like, hey, you know what, this one person's going to be moving this? Because I also had a student, a teacher helper as well, who did the pacing tracker, and I just hear, questions and concerns about that. So how did you create that environment for your students?
So first of all, I do think a lot of people have a really hard time giving up control. I think most teachers, and I am 100% guilty of this, are control freaks. We want to control the time, the pace, what students are doing. And I think that when you can take a moment and take a step back and take that leap of faith, you will be shocked at the results. I have the privilege of seeing students 6th, 7th, and 8th. So I will see repeat students. So I'll just get to know them, which obviously is very helpful. And, the students who are the ones that I wouldn't trust working on the public tracker or doing a task that I don't think they're ready for, I don't give them control. I think that it's easy enough as that. So I think that answers your question.
Yeah. No, that's a great point too, right? Like a lot of people will say trust is earned. So it's like, you kind of have to show that you are trustworthy. I mean, of course we would love to just be able to trust people right from the start. Right. But again, as humans continue to behave the way we behave, we know that trust is earned. And so I really like that reminder too of like, you know what, there are a group of students, and especially if we're talking about middle schoolers, right? Middle schoolers are like heathens out here, and they're the best. I love them so much. And yes, we want to be really mindful and intentional with like who we give control to, right? Or just like give specific tasks to. So thank you for sharing that. And so let's shift a little bit more. You're talking about self-pacing, and you're saying like, hey, it's really beneficial. It but it encourages and it invites students, right? It welcomes students to come in and learn at their own pace, where they can pick up where they left off. They don't really need me to guide them through all of these things. So again, that's more social emotional learning and life skills, right? That's happening. Let's talk about safety though, right? Because again, this is a concern. You are handling a lot of different things that middle schoolers can get real turnt with, right? And so how do you ensure just safety in general? Because I know we're thinking about sewing, right? There are needles involved. So how do you ensure the safety, first of all, if the classes are self-paced? Do you do like a whole group first? Or did you create a routine where students are able to self-pace when it comes to being safe?
Yeah. So right now I'm thinking of my 6th grade class. They're actually sewing right now. And one of the things that I did just to start out is I talk about my expectations. I have them sign a little sewing promise, as I call it, where we go over that they have to use every tool with its intended purpose. We go over how to use things. Yes, a needle is sharp. You don't need to test it with your finger. And then once we have that conversation, and I do this very sternly, then I say, now let's have fun. Like, I really want you to have fun with this. So then what students will do is I have a slides that I've created with there's a practice slide with a couple different instructional videos. The first one is threading a needle. Super simple. So I'm floating around the room. They're doing that really fast. The second one is they have to tie a knot, and they have to do that 3 times, pop their hand up. I'll come and see it. Good, you can move on to the running stitch. And then they do their running stitch. And I've never, I'm trying to think, Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a problem with students, sixth graders, these little babies, with the equipment, because we start slow, but they're going at their own pace. I'm not saying, okay, everyone hold up your needle, let's thread your needle and tie a knot, and we're going to do the running stitch around all four corners here, because that's very overwhelming. And then if they get overwhelmed, then they're going to start goofing off. And so because we start slow and they have that control to move on when they're ready, and I'm circulating and I can see what they've done, it creates a really great environment. And then our kids that are out, who had the flu for a couple of days, they just pick up where they left off. They're not starting where everyone, is. And I cannot imagine teaching sewing any other way, because I've just seen this working so seamlessly. So that's with sewing, but we do a lot with foods. So for safety, I'll do a lot of demonstrations. So I have one of those tables that have a mirror. And I know some FACS teachers have like cameras and different things so that students can see. I'll demonstrate how to use a paring knife to cut off the stem of something, or how to make small chops or whatever. So I'll like show them how to do it. And I'll do this as a whole class because they love those demos. We'll have food sampling at the end. So there is certainly a place for whole class instruction. And they're also in small groups. So when we are in the foods labs, again, teaching at the middle level, they're all cooking the exact same thing. I have everything laid out for them. And we just start slow, because I think that's where I need to meet them. And then they can have a little bit more freedom and do a little bit more once they get to the high school.
And I wanted to say too, Mauranda, listening to you, and you're saying we're starting out slow. There's a couple of things that's also really working out really well for your students and for in your class, right? You're clear with the expectations because you start out with the sewing promise, right? You provide multiple ways for them to see the thing through the videos so that they can actually practice, see it, visualize it, and then do it. So I think, again, there's just that clear sense of like where they're going and what they need to do. It's transparent what is expected of them. And then you're scaffolding, like you said, right? Starting slow, you're scaffolding. So when we do these supports, our students are going to pay attention because they feel successful. They feel like they can engage and enter in with whatever skill that they have because you are scaffolding it for them. I mean, this is honestly great for any content, right? Just starting out with little steps first, and also kind of goes with implementing this model, starting out slow and then building up to it. Because again, we are going to require human behavior, right? Like we like for things to be accessible to us. And if not, we shut down. It's the whole like zone of proximal development or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's ZPD, right? So, mm-hmm. So yeah, and then I'm thinking too, with the food sampling, that's definitely a motivator for me, to cook something, and then we can like sample what we cooked and see how it turns out. So this is great. I really love it. And you naming also that there is time and space for whole group. When you're implementing the model, it's not you're self-pacing the entire time. There are small groups, there's one-on-one, there's whole group whenever necessary, because again, like you said, students really enjoy the whole group because again, that is what they're used to, right? So it's okay to sprinkle that in as well. So I love the whole safety thing of just, again, modeling, repetition, making sure they understand like why this is important and why it's needed for us to be safe. And then students will follow through regardless of their age, regardless of whether or not they're in middle school, right? So yes. That's great. Okay. So then, you teach 6th, 7th, and 8th, and you did say that you get to develop really great relationships with your students because you see them and you are part of their middle school experience all 3 years, which is really beautiful. I love that. I've always wanted to loop. So, I guess, how do you manage planning for your classes? Because those are 3 different grades, right? And you're creating videos and then you have different topics that you need to cover. How are you managing that?
So this year I'm only teaching 6th and 8th grade. We did some restructuring at my district. But one of the ways that I try to keep track of everything is I have lots of documents. We use Google, the Google Suite for in our district. And I try to just keep really good records of what went well. So I'll take the tracker, the individual tracker, for instance, and then I'll link all of the assignments that are tied with that, or the video that's tied with that. So I think that's very helpful. I just really try to write a lot of things down. I have a lot of lists. It is a lot to plan. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but a lot of what I did was done initially at the beginning. So 2020, 2021, 2022. And then I've just tweaked things along the way. So it's kind of a lot to get started. It's so worth it though, because when I hear students or teachers saying, I have so much to grade or so much to plan or so much to copy, or I have to think about, all these different things I need to do, I don't have that problem in the same way. So of course I'll tweak and change things, but it's much more fun to change one assignment out of 10 than create 10 new ones. You know what I mean? So that's one thing that I do think is it's definitely a lot of work, but it will pay off, and your later self will certainly thank you. Another thing is I really do try to keep it simple. So I feel like I've kind of said that a lot throughout this podcast, is just saying that I really try to start small. Don't take on too much. I think that sometimes we get bogged down with some of the busyness that we think that needs to fill the space during our 40-minute, 80-minute class period, what have you. And sometimes it's okay to have an assignment and then to play a game of I do like this questionnaire thing on whiteboards, and they have to come up with the answer. So play a quick game related to your content, or just go around and share what you're doing over the weekend. So I think that that's another thing that I've learned, is that I can just kind of keep it simple.
Yeah. And something that I've heard too, Mauranda, is that when teachers start implementing self-pacing, right, in the classrooms, they actually have more time. Like they're actually ahead of the pace that the curriculum has them on, because students are just mastering the concepts left and right. And this, something that you said, right, start small, make sure it's simple. Don't do too much. I definitely did too much, right? I was like, I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do this. I want to do that. I had to be reeled in by Kareem, who was the one who was observing me, and was like, bruh, let go. Like, let go. You're doing too much. And so again, this is a nice reminder to not do too much, because again, right, incorporating play is so important, because I was just in another recording where, he was a PE teacher, Jake, and he's working with elementary school students, and he's saying the importance of play, right? Like our elementary school students really love play. And then for some reason in middle school and high school, it just like disappears. And so we have to be really intentional with creating opportunities for our students to play, because there are so many ways to play with the content that we're teaching, right? And I think you also said really beautifully too, is that the community building aspect is really important, right? Like it doesn't have to be content all the time. And because self-pacing is happening, again, you are ahead of pace. You are a lot less stressed. So that you are able to make those connections with students and not coming in with a lot of anger and frustrations, as we often do as teachers because of all the things that we have to do, right? So it's really great to think about the planning of the classes. And so when you started implementing the model, Mauranda, did you do it in all of your classes, or did you also start out small and it was just one class that you practiced or you implemented in?
I believe I started out small. I believe it was self-pacing. So I just looked at my curriculum or my lessons and the assignments, and I just started to create checklists, individual trackers for them to check off and move at their own pace. But I found that I had to keep moving, because I saw it working so well that the classes that I wasn't doing it in, I was like, oh, they're not getting the best version of this class. So I really want to incorporate the model, all the pillars, components of the model as quickly as possible in all of my classes. So, yeah.
You saw, oh my gosh, again, okay, you're not the first person that I hear. This model really does support me in being the best version of myself for students, and also like the best version of this class, right? And I love to hear that. That's so great. That's so great to hear. And so I know that we've talked about mastery, right? Like you said, with sewing, students raise their hand, then you go and see if they've like, okay, you're good to go. Mm-hmm. What are other, how do your other mastery checks look like in your classes? Or even just like what does mastery look like in your classes?
So it looks different depending on the topic. So as I've mentioned, FACS covers so many different subtopics: careers, professionalism and etiquette, housing, interior design, foods, etc. So it really depends on what we're doing with the given grade. So for skill dependent, for the foods units, I kind of mentioned I'll do the demos. We might do an exercise or a worksheet where they will have to identify the kitchen tool, and then they'll have to come up with the use. Sometimes I'll have them actually come up and demonstrate that they can measure using a dry measuring cup or liquid measuring cup appropriately. Can they whisk? Can they do the skill? So that would be for the foods classes. For sewing, as I've mentioned, can they thread the needle? Can they tie the knot? Can they do the running stitch? However, that's not all of the topics. So one of the units that we just did in 8th grade was careers, and we looked at how to write a resume and a cover letter. We went over interview etiquette, how to conduct yourself in an interview, and then they actually interviewed one another. So we did a little mock interview. We invited some teachers in, and it was so rewarding for me to see them working and being their best professional selves. And then sometimes we'll just use a traditional mastery check. Again, it just really depends on the topic that we are studying. In our financial unit, when we're talking about budgeting, they may have a paper mastery check with 5 questions on it that they need to answer based on the assignments that they did prior. So, and again, I think this is really fun because it really changes depending on the topic that we're studying, our unit. And that's fun for me as the teacher because it's not the same thing. It's not pen and paper work every single time.
You're making me like I want to go back to middle school and high school and take that. Because Mauranda, I don't know what the kitchen tools are. I don't know what they're supposed to be doing.
And that's a problem. That's a problem. That's why we need more FACS teachers. We need more FACS programs. It needs to be something that our school districts are waking up and seeing that this is a huge, huge need for our students.
Yeah, because I mean, there's so many like TikTok videos, right? Of like, oh, I was 30 plus when I learned that this is a thing that you do. And I was like, bro, what is happening? Why am I just now learning about this and now understanding that like FACS teachers really help with those life skills that we definitely need.
Yeah.
Oh man, you're giving me so much to think about. I mean, it sounds like you're having so much fun just teaching this content, and then also teaching it in a way where it's modern classrooms, right? Like self-paced and blended learning and mastery based. And so that's really just really exciting to hear. All I can think about right now, Mauranda, is like, dang, I should have had this class. Really, like, what kind of individual would I be if I had FACS?
Well, you're giving me a lot of credit, Toni Rose, so thank you. But I will often say to students, because they'll ask like a question about money, we talk about taxes, and they'll kind of ask some questions, and they're, of course, wanting to make a lot of money someday. And I'm like, well, if that happens for you, you better come back and tell me, take me to lunch, and remember all of those essential skills that we talked about when you were 13 years old.
Yeah. And that's real world, right? Like that's real world application that is relevant to them, understanding what are taxes? Why do I need to care about taxes? And why do I need to do what I need to do for taxes? Right. So, my friends and I are always joking about how, again, this is a meme that has happened that's all over social media. It's like, hey, we learned about the different equations and different angles, but we didn't learn what taxes were. We didn't learn what life insurance or any insurance actually is out there. So it's such a learning curve. I do have a question. I'm curious because when I was in high school, now mind you, I did go to a high school in South Georgia. So our high school had a daycare, right, for my classmates who got pregnant and have kids, but because we still wanted the students to come in, even though they have a kid, right? Would that be considered family and consumer sciences? Because it was a class where like students were coming in there and engaging with the babies.
So we have something, this is kind of different, but maybe
different. Okay.
I don't know, maybe we can connect this. So at our high school, we have one of our courses, the child psychology class. It is a full year class. The beginning of the course is very content based. And then the second half, they have a preschool. So they have students come in, they get to actually practice what they preach. They get to create lessons, craft, snack, the whole day for them. So I guess it would depend on the parameters, what that looks like in your district, but I feel like it would definitely be a nod in that direction. And depending on what they're learning, if they're learning childcare, I don't see why it wouldn't be a crossover.
Right. Because that's what I was thinking. Like, this is my biggest flex is like, I went to high school with a daycare, bam, right? Like, yes, cool, teen pregnancy. And also we created a solution for students to continue showing up for school. So having a kid wasn't an excuse. But yeah, that's just always been in the back of my mind of like, well, was that? But it was a class. It was definitely a class. It was an elective where students can be in those spaces. And I guess it is childcare that they're learning about. So, okay.
So, yeah, right, I would say so.
Thanks. Now I feel like I have to go back down to South Georgia and be like, yo, what was this class? I'm curious now.
You let me know. I'm curious too.
Yes, definitely.
Hey there, listeners. This is Zach. Got some announcements for you for the week of March 9th, 2025. Our co-founder, Rob Barnett, will be at the Summit for Transformative Learning, presenting on how modern classrooms can help meet every learner's needs in Atlanta, Georgia, from March 10th through the 11th. Are you looking for virtual connection? Join our Implementer Meetup on Wednesday, March 12th at 7 p.m. Eastern to connect with other modern classrooms educators. Toni Rose, our intrepid co-host, and Avery Balasbas, who has also hosted and guested on this podcast, will be at the 2025 Good Teaching Conference South, presenting on cultivating community in your classroom and teaching critical pedagogy through Fil-Am Lit in Garden Grove, California, from March 14th through 16th. If you're attending, please be sure to stop by and say hi. But for now, let's get back into it with TR and Mauranda.
Okay, so you shared two resources with us. One of them is a reflection form, and then the other one is Exploring Careers Choice Board. So I know that you talked about with your 8th graders that you had, resumes and interview etiquette, and then like practicing the interviews with other, adults in the classroom. And so being able to see that professional side, that's really fun. Do you want to start out with telling our listeners about this Exploring Careers Choice Board? And of course, we're going to put this in the show notes so that you all can access it as well.
Sure. So the choice board was created for students to create assignments that I prior would give as like a whole class assignment. I'd go over it and then they would work on it. Well, what I was finding was that students were finishing quickly. Some of them were taking a little bit longer. Students were absent. So I created this choice board. And then I also gave them the choice to work with other people. Now, some students love this and are very social, and I tacked the Aspire to Do credit onto that, so they would get a little bit more points. And then I have some students that are a little more reluctant to group work. They'd rather work by themselves, but knowing that they'll get more points, they're going to push themselves out of their comfort zone and they're going to work with somebody else. So that collaboration piece I thought was very important because, again, I want students to collaborate. I want them to work together. I want them to work with not just the same person, which was part of this deal too. They had to work with somebody different each time. And then in terms of the content, the instruction here, I wanted to take the instruction that I was and the assignments that were given to students prior, put it in a self-paced structure so they could kind of move about at their own pace. There were various assignments, an article to read. There was one where they had to come up with employability skills for every letter of the alphabet. So just to get them thinking about their work ethic and how they can present themselves professionally. And this was done as an intro, exploring careers at the beginning of our career unit.
Oh, how fun. How fun. I love the incentive to be able to work with a partner and then to work with someone that you haven't worked with, right? And so this whole concept now, if y'all see this document, listeners, you'll see that there's like a green column. It says aspire to do as partner. And this is making me think about the choice, right? Like you said, there's choice. Because again, oftentimes we have options, but we don't provide that choice. And so for you to say, you know what, there are students who would love to work with others, and then there are some who don't want to work with other people and they just want to do it themselves, and they can. And also they know that they have this choice to work with a partner if they wanted to get the incentives, right? So I really love that phrasing as well. And again, this is kind of like a explore your own kind of deal, right? You said like, hey, it doesn't have to be in order. You can pick and choose what you want to explore, what you want to do together as a pair or by yourself. But this is really, really cool. So what has been, because again, as an adult, I'm learning now that there's so many cool careers that I could have gotten into, and I just had no idea, right? And so the more I talk to people, the more I find myself saying, wait, that's a job? So what is one career that your students have just been kind of shocked about? They're like, oh, that's an option that I could do?
That's a really great question. And I too, I definitely am thankful for the journey that I'm on, but man, there are so many things out there. A lot of students want to be an anesthesiologist, but I think a lot of that is because they saw the salary of what they make. And so then we have further conversations about, do you have any idea how much schooling that is and how expensive it is to go to college? A lot of students want to do kind of the typical doctor, lawyer, pro NFL player. But I think they start to kind of look that there's social work was another one that they were very interested in, and psychology. They had heard some of the terms, and then when they saw the career kind of laid out, they were like, oh, that's really interesting. So
it's always the money, right? Like, I want to go where the money is, and then you break it down for them and they're like, oh, wait, I got to do all of that.
Oh my gosh, I know. And then they're like, well, I'll make a lot of money. Chasing the bag, I learned I'm obviously learning words from them all the time, but I just have this one student when he told me he wanted to be an anesthesiologist, I'm like, that's a lot of schooling. He's like, I got to chase the bag. And I'm like, oh boy, money is not everything.
It really is not. And it does fix a lot of things.
It does. Coming from a teacher.
Right. It requires a lot of, discipline, I think, when it comes to that stuff. But that's really fun. Like, see, that's the thing also that I learned as an adult, that I was like, dang, I could have gone, like, I didn't have to be a doctor. Like, I could have done this part. Like, that's wild to me. Anyways. So, okay.
Yes.
That's really cool. Because I know when I was back in the classroom, or at least when I was also a student, right? Like, everyone just kind of wanted to be a basketball player or football player because, again, they make so much money. But statistically, it's really difficult to make it to the pros, right? So, and that's something that we don't talk about either, or at least like my classmates or my students would just be like, no, I'm going to make it. So it's dope that the conversation is expanding, right? So, yes. Okay, tell us more about this reflection form.
So this reflection form is pretty simple. It's just a quick little way for me to check in with students. I love hearing feedback on my teaching, self-pacing, the content, but then I also want to check in with them. How's life going? How are you feeling? What's stressing you out right now? I really like to do this at the start of, so I did it in January 2025. I like to do it after a couple weeks of the school year have started. Sometimes I'll get into a really good groove and do it at the end of every topic. It just kind of varies. And it also depends on my students. Sometimes we have to have reflections where I really want them to look at their behavior because their behavior is not so great. So I'll have them pause, reflect. What are you doing to help the culture of this classroom? What are you doing to hinder a better experience for learners? So I really try to kind of gauge the temperature of the room, but I also don't want it to be routine where they're doing it every single day and just like quickly clicking through and, selecting answers. So I do think reflecting is very important. I think it's very important as an educator, as a mother, as a wife. I really try to be reflective and always try to improve. So that's why I think it's a good practice for students as well.
And what's the tea lately with middle schoolers? What do they tell you in these reflections? Because that's my favorite part, reading the daily reflections that my students did. Because I'd be like, oh, so and so liked this one. Oh, there's a drama between so and so and so and so.
I really try to stay out of it because it's just a lot. And when they're that young, everything is just the biggest deal. During our Dress to Impress Day, our mock interviews, I gave them an incentive to dress professionally. And one of the students came up to me and said, I cannot dress up. I will be not picked on, but I won't, like, it's not cool. I can't remember the exact wording that she said, but I just felt so bad for her because I remember middle school Mauranda and it was tough. So my heart just goes out to them because it's just such a big deal, all these little things. So I don't have any big tea for you, but just that, how humbling it is just to remember how difficult it is to just need that approval from your peers and you want to look the same as everybody else. And so I try to just encourage them to embrace themselves and to be different. My name is spelt very differently than typical Mauranda, M-I-R. And I love that my name is different. I love to be unique now. So I don't know. That's what I wish for them.
Yeah. And I think the reflection piece is such an important tool, right, for students to share whatever it is that's coming up for them, right? Because I know, like, I talk about tea. Like, my students will tell me all the tea because I'm messy like that. And I'll admit it, whatever. I needed toxicity in my life. And middle school toxicity was everything I wanted it to be.
Oh, boy.
But there are also, like, opportunities and spaces for students to really get deep and say, like, hey, I'm feeling really angry because this happened, right, outside of the classroom. Or, hey, I'm not feeling it today, so please don't come talk to me. So the reflection tool is really, really important for me as an educator to figure out how I can navigate conversations and relationships with students as they show up in real time. So that's why I'm like, hey, reflection tools are just like a do now, a check-in or something is really important. And I also really love that you said, like, you don't do it every day, but you do it enough that students know, hey, we're going to reflect and I can share whatever it is that I need to share with my teacher as well. So thank you for sharing that. And so listeners, you'll have access to that as well in the show notes. So Mauranda, as we wrap up our conversation, for any CTE teachers out there, which is career technology education, right? I feel like I am befriending a lot of CTE teachers because I feel like y'all have a lot of skills that I need those skills. But for any CTE teachers out there who may be interested but hesitant in implementing this model, right? What is a piece of advice that you have for them? I know that you had said scaffolding, making it simple, slow down, right? Is there anything else that you would add to that?
I would encourage teachers to just start looking at the work that they give their students. Can they weed things out? What is essential versus non-essential? What are must-do things? What are optional? What are more extra credit looking assignments, projects, etc. Let's not give our students just busy work to keep them busy. And then I would just start with self-pacing, create a checklist, figure out the most important things, put that in a checklist, let them work on their own pace, and then look at that blended learning piece. Then start creating your own videos. I've had so many teachers say to me, there's no way I'm going to create a video, or they create one and they have like pages and pages of a script. And they're like, it took me an hour to do this one video. And then they're just discouraged. So in another life, I would create all of this and give this to them to use, because I have been asked that a couple of times. What resources do you have? I just wish that I could just have this in my lap. But for now, I just would really encourage them just to start slow, look at what they already do, see what they can weed out, and then kind of attack that blended learning, creating videos on the latter half once they have a little bit more time, because they're using that self-pacing model.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely unpopular opinion, right? Like, not everything we do is important, actually. Yeah.
And you don't need to be in control all the time.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, definitely relinquish, release, like less is more. Less is more. So I do have another follow-up question for you, Mauranda, because I know that you're a mentor now for Modern Classrooms. How has that role impacted your teaching and learning strategies and practices and mindset? Like, has that changed anything for you? What have you seen that's a common trend? Anything that you'd like to share as a mentor? Because I don't often ask enough mentors this question, actually. So I want to start.
So a trend, I don't necessarily know of a trend. I do feel like mentees, I feel like they just really need a lot of support and ideas. So that's one thing that I try to kind of come alongside them and kind of be their hype person and be like, you're doing a great job. You have these great ideas. Let's just figure out how we can put it in the model. And don't feel like everything has to be exactly like cookie cutter. We can kind of, flow a little bit and twist things a little bit to work for you. So I guess one thing, I feel like this kind of answers your question, is I'll see them kind of be a little bit more rigid in what they think things need to look like. And then by the end, they'll realize, okay, I can be a little bit more free with this, or I don't need to have a mastery check that looks exactly like this. So I guess just learning that flexibility. And that's just been a great reminder for myself. I think whenever you're critiquing work or looking at other ideas, you can't help but get inspired and think of, how you can incorporate that, or maybe you should try that, or that's a really good idea. So I think that that's been good for me professionally to kind of expand my mind. And it's just a lot of fun. I really love working with teachers and seeing what cool things they're doing in their classrooms.
That gave me chills. I love hearing that. And I think something that comes up for me is that there's validation as a mentor, right? You're able to validate their feelings, validate the fact that, hey, you have skills, you have strengths. Let's work on those skills and those strengths. You don't actually have to throw all of that away. We're going to work those strengths and skills out, enhance them, while also implementing little things, right? So I think it's that validation piece of like, hey, this is scary. I have another adult telling me like, oh, am I doing something well? Am I not doing am I not doing something well? So it's like this vulnerability piece of it, right? So it's like the validation of, like you said, I am their hype person, right? We just want to validate people's feelings. And then of course, like sometimes we don't even think that we need it, but permission, right? It's like, we're not looking for permission, but it is nice to say like, oh, you mean I can play around with this? You mean that I don't have to be so rigid? You mean, wait a minute, mine doesn't have to look like that all the time. It can look the way that works for my brain, for my skill set, for my strengths. And it's like, yeah, so it's really that permission to also play, permission to do something different, permission to step away from like what we've been doing every single day. Because I think sometimes as educators, we tend to like tunnel vision and that's it, right? So it's a really nice reminder when working with mentors. And yeah, that I haven't heard that yet, Mauranda. So this is really cool for me to hear that, like, they start out really rigid, right? As we typically do as educators. And then towards the end, they just feel a little bit more free, a little bit more liberated to actually create a space for all of their learners and including themselves, right? Like, how do I make this a fun and joyful learning environment for me and my students? So thank you for that. That is so beautiful. So beautiful. So Mauranda, what do you hope to see in the future? What goals do you have? It could be personal. It could be professional. I know that you and I had talked about your own business. Do you want to do a plug for that as well? Because I'd love to hear about it as well. Share with us whatever you want to share with the listeners.
Sure. So my business is My Wholesome Table. So I love working with individuals to educate them on food and nutrition. As we've talked about a couple of times in school, we don't always learn everything that we need to take care of ourselves. So I love to come alongside individuals and show them how they can improve their lives, how they can incorporate some more physical activity, how they can make better healthy choices, and not, diet wise, like putting them on a diet, but just talking about how we can create a better life for you through food. Food is just so powerful. So I like working with clients. I have led workshops, teachers. I've had some different teacher workshops that I've done. So that's a huge passion of mine. What I hope to see more teaching professionally, modern classroom speaking, I just want to continue to spread the word of the Modern Classrooms Project. I really want to see more educators in my own district. In facts, I think that this is the future of education, and we need to be meeting our students. We need to be showing them how they can take ownership over their learning. So I just would love to see more self-pacing in facts and beyond. So those would be a couple of goals that I have moving forward.
Yes. And thank you for sharing that. It's so good to hear also, just the whole concept of having, again, a thought partner or just someone there to support you when you're creating a more healthy habit for yourself, right? Like My Wholesome Table is really a great idea for that. And I think it made me think about mindful eating, right? Not necessarily diets, but just, you know what, like, let's just be mindful of what we're putting in our bodies. And I love that there's a whole movement to that as well. So yes to self-pacing and facts. Yes to, being our healthier versions, because we got to take care of ourselves to be able to do all the things that we need and want to do. So Mauranda, how can our listeners connect with you?
So they can connect with me a few different ways. You can just reach out via email, mauranda.comley@modernclassrooms.org, and we can put that in the show notes, I'm sure. And then my website is mywholesometable.org, and there's different ways to connect. There's lots of recipes, more about my consultation business there. But yeah, I would love to hear from you. And if there's any other facts teachers out there that are looking for a thought partner or some examples, I love talking about this. Clearly, if you didn't get the passion in my voice, so feel free to reach out.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mauranda. I know that I was looking forward to this because, again, like I said in the beginning, right, you're expanding my brain. So I really just appreciate you sharing your experience and expertise with us. Just thank you for expanding my brain.
Thank you, Toni Rose. Thank you so much for having me on. It was great talking to you. And I really appreciate you creating some time and space for us to have a little chat here.
Yes.
Thank you so much for listening. You can find links to topics and tools we discussed in our show notes for this episode. And remember, you can learn more about our work at www.modernclassrooms.org. And you can learn the essentials of our model through our free course at learn.modernclassrooms.org. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at modernclassproj, that's Proj. We are so appreciative of all you do for students in schools. Have a great week, and we'll be back next Sunday with another episode of the Modern Classrooms Project podcast.